Welcome back to the program. So you're on pit road. Tires are hot, brakes are glowing, engines are ripping, and you see the smoke come off the tires. You catch that smell, the rubber, the fuel, the heat. It's familiar and it's part of racing. But here's the question. What are you actually breathing in at that moment? Because if you can smell it, you're not just noticing it, you're absorbing it. You see, most motorsports athletes believe that the smell is just part of the whole racing experience, not something that's really affecting performance. And I get why. It's open air, it's not constant, it's part of the culture, it's familiar, so it doesn't feel like a risk. But here's where it gets interesting. The exact same materials you're inhaling at the track are tightly controlled in manufacturing environments. In facilities like Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, exposure isn't left to chance. It's actually engineered. And they use things like local exhaust ventilation to pull fumes away at the source, or full air exchange systems to control airborne particles, enclosed mixing processes to reduce direct exposure, automated material handling, continuous air monitoring for carbon black for VOCs and rubber fumes, and OSHA and noise exposure limits. And that's, of course, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and NOISH is National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. And where required, workers wear respirators and gloves, protective clothing, and there are even medical surveillance programs tracking long-term exposure. In manufacturing, everything is measured, controlled, and protected and regulated. Now, compare that to the track. Same materials, very different environment. You see, on race day, there's no respiratory protection, no exposure monitoring, no filtration systems, high heat activating chemicals, elevated breathing rates, and repeated exposure week after week, season after season. This isn't safer, it's just less controlled. So let's break down what's actually in that smell. So these are chemicals that turn into gas molecules when heated. And at the track, they come from racing fuel, from heated tires, from track surface sealers, from plastics, paints, adhesives in and around the car. And when you smell that fuel, you're inhaling VOCs, those volatile organic compounds. Now, there's something else called PAH, and these are called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. And these are created when materials burn or degrade under high heat. So think tire smoke, exhaust, heated asphalt. They are fat soluble, they're bioaccumulative, and they are some of them are actually neuroactive. Now, there is a neurological impact here, and this is where it becomes performance critical. These compounds can influence reaction time, cognitive clarity, decision making speed, and even those subtle changes matter at 180 miles per hour. And here's where this conversation gets deeper. So this past weekend at Darlington during Alumni Weekend, a lot of former drivers were back at the track. And if you were there, you may have noticed something. Some of the veterans didn't seem as nimble or sharp as they once were. Speech patterns were slower, thoughts a little bit harder to connect, mobility compromised. Now, we're not pointing fingers and we're not drawing conclusions, but we are asking a better question. Is this just aging? Or could decades of exposure combined with stress and inflammation and neurological load be playing a role here? And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Every time that you smell that hot rubber, you see tire smoke, you catch the scent of racing fuel, that's exposure happening in real time. So instead of ignoring it, what we do is we measure it and remove it. Over at our high performance health shop, Victory Lane Wellness, we use advanced integrative health tests such as Candida metabolic and vitamins test. This is also known as the organic acids test. And it looks at detoxification pathways. It looks at glutathione levels. It looks at mitochondrial stress for testing energy and performance. And we also use something else called the minerals and metals test. This looks at magnesium and zinc and electrolytes to see the amount of stress the body is enduring and its response to that stress, as well as your individual heavy metal burden. Now, there's another test that we use. It's called the environmental toxicity test to look at chemical exposure patterns and detox capacity as well. These are simple, they're CLIA certified at home health tests that show what your body is dealing with that may be slowing you down. Because detox isn't optional, it's actually happening every day. And for optimal performance, depends on those natural key elements like the glutathione, the magnesium, the zinc, the sulfur compounds. If those are depleted, the system slows down. So the strategy becomes support the system. And how do we do that? Well, there's a few different ways that we can do that. We can use something that's called the functional medicine detox protocol. And this is advanced. We use the advanced testing to identify the deficiencies and the toxicities that are actually stealing your edge. And then we execute a 21-day performance reset protocol. This supports both phase 1 and phase 2 liver detoxification. And then we would implement daily detox support to maintain results of that protocol. And then probably another 7-day reset in the motorsports industry, probably every 60 days. Most people every 90 days. But when you're in a high exposure environment, typically every 60 days, first responders, firefighters, they would probably fall into that category as well. And then annually, we would do a heavy metal detox protocol. Depending on the test results, we might do that twice a year, especially relevant in motorsports. Heavy metals, we're looking for cadmium, arsenic, mercury, lead, aluminum, and those are very important to get out of the body as quickly as possible. A few other things we can implement would be, it's not all about supplementation, but infrared sauna. Infrared sauna more days than not to promote detox and recovery. And then some other basic detoxification strategies would be rebounding, dry brushing, daily sweating, of course. Intermittent fasting is another great one. Salt baths when you can implement those. And it's not all about health hacks either. Nutritional support comes into play as well. And that is especially relevant for traveling teams that are, traveling week after week. We want to support detox with things like broccoli sprouts because of the sulforaphane in the broccoli sprouts. Garlic and onions is another one because of the sulfur compounds in there, helps with detoxification. But of course, and most people don't know this right here, if you're struggling with gas and bloating, you may want to avoid the garlic and onions because although they're a good antimicrobial, they also can feed overgrown yeast and fungal bacteria in the gut. And we don't want that. Leafy greens are another great one for those minerals. Pumpkin seeds are great for zinc and copper. And of course, we always want to be drinking filtered water and reduce processed foods and especially the chemical heavy sports drinks. Now, if toxic burden is ignored, you might see slower reaction time, reduced clarity, increased fatigue, and longer recovery. And then over time, that becomes cumulative for neurological stress. But here's the key. This is more preventable than most people think. And if you're part of a motorsports team looking to better understand how environmental exposure is affecting performance and longevity, these are conversations that we are having every day. So the next time you smell the track, will you think of it as part of the experience or part of your performance? If you want to understand how your body's handling these exposures, you can start with a free assessment or a complimentary consultation over at victorylanewellness.com. In the factory, exposure is controlled. On the track, it's experienced. The tire is built to break down, but the body absorbs that breakdown unless you support it. Because champions don't guess, they test. And until next time, I'll see you in victory lane. Bye bye.